Good morning, Chris.
Hey, Richard. Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. How was your week?
It was a great week. Got a chance to catch up on a lot of writing and reading that I needed to do. But overall, so many exciting releases this week on the video front, on the creator front, but also new models. So excited to talk about the news this week.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, same. Ran an event on Tuesday as well. So was back in face-to-face interactions with leaders, product and engineering and design leaders, asking lots of questions about how they're getting stuff done right now and what it looks like in a world where AI is going to be informing a lot of their decisions about what kind of software they use, what kind of processes they use, how they're going to be assembling teams. And then next week, I will be in San Francisco attending Config, which is Figma's big 2-day conference. This is kind of like the currently the largest product design conference on the calendar right now, and expecting to see a lot of people there, have lots of meetings set up. So I will be reporting back on that at some point.
Excellent. Well, let's start there, Richard, because you're at the forefront of businesses right now, looking at systems, but also thinking about AI. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we had Apple's event last week, and coming off that, a lot of companies, a lot of people had thoughts in terms of how Apple had positioned themselves. And then going into Config, I'm sure companies equally have thoughts in terms of what the opportunity might be for them to optimize their systems. Can you just give us some insight as to what questions companies are asking today? How are they feeling about the state of AI? Know that we have at least plans from Google, Microsoft, and Apple on the table. What is the pulse that you're getting from the market?
Yeah, I think the biggest theme is that companies are realizing that there's no best practice. And the reason why there's no best practice is because, well, we haven't done this before. We haven't actually lived in a world where we have a productivity tool that's being rolled out as quickly as this, right? So one of the big things that we've noticed, and probably a distinction from other technology rollouts, is that this is happening very, very, very fast. And so very clearly the leadership and the people that are responsible for making these things part of their initiatives, part of their plans, it's just very confusing as to how to move forward. So we're seeing different approaches. And I think that's maybe permission for people who are listening to this wondering, what should I do? Well, the reality is do whatever you think is right for you, whatever contextually makes sense for your business. I'll give you some anecdotes. One company that I have been working closely with has decided to create an AI product that is parallel and separate from its existing core product. So instead of trying to make the core product an AI product and retrofit it or add additional features and kind of bolt on AI to that, what they've done is decided to create an AI-driven tool that is sitting alongside that, and that there is going to be some connective tissue between them. In that way, they can reduce risk, so they can start running experiments. They can actually do what we're seeing a lot of companies do, and that's lead with content and community and then introduce the product into that. So as a lot of the people who listen to this are product people, we'll just kind of go through that. Traditionally, what you did is you built a product and then you went to market with that product. You found product market fit as quickly as possible. And then you basically threw gas on that fire. You would raise a lot of money and you would spend most of that money on your go-to-market campaigns to try and get it into the hands of as many people as possible. And that's where we get PLG, product-led growth, and that kind of strategy emerging there. Well, that's pretty much over. We don't see as much of that PLG, raise $100 million and throw it into marketing kind of strategies anymore. What we're seeing is a switch to understanding what the market actually wants. And you can do that through creating content. So you can create content, get into a conversation with the people that are interacting with that content. LinkedIn's obviously a fantastic place to do this, but there are other forums, one-on-one as well, creating community events, bringing people together, hearing what they have to say, and then introducing a product that's not entirely baked. So this is a kind of an early stage, or in the old days, we might call this an MVP, but a very idealistic, hey, let's see what this looks like to you, get some feedback, and use that forum and that community as your testing ground, and then start with there. And I think this is actually a very intelligent way of doing things because it's very low risk, right? You can introduce an idea into the community. You're treating them as pioneer customers. You're treating them as co-authors, if you will. And that co-authoring responsibility, because it's falling partly on the consumer or the customer, they're excited about it. Like, hey, listen, we found a bug, but instead of shitting on you on social media, we're actually going to help you figure this out, and we're going to help you create a better product out of that. So that's one approach. We are seeing some companies think about developing AI separately, maybe as a function or a team within an organization. But there's a warning label on that, and the warning label says, be very cautious that when you create something in a silo or in a skunkworks and then introduce it to the larger organization, it can actually very often be seen as either condescending or it can just be seen as a threat. So I think one of the things that we're going to need leaders to understand here is that whenever you're introducing either a new product or a new line or a new initiative, including anything that to do with AI, communication is essential. You need to explain to your team what that means for them, how they're going to remain relevant, how you're going to be retraining them or reassigning them to the work. And this is what you and I talk about a lot in terms of AI literacy. It's not just a case of taking on new technology. It's not just, hey, we got the greatest and latest in terms of models, but it's actually talking to your team about how we're going to get that team to appreciate what it is that we're doing here and also then feel like they're part of that change and not be threatened by it. And then one last thing I'll point out is that I'm very curious to see that Llama has come up in a lot of conversations. I think the open source nature of it is allowing companies to be a lot more experimental, a lot more agile, if you will, agile with a small a, in the sense that they can take something and they can build it in an environment, a private environment or closed environment. They can do these experiments. They can essentially kick the tires and find out whether AI is right for them. And it's pretty meaningful for those, especially enterprises that need to experiment with something before they go into the public market.
That's really interesting because, of course, even this week, Meta released a bunch of open source models to complement Llama on the audio side, on the multimodal side. So we look at it from the business lens, but what about employees and creators? If you're someone thinking, okay, how do I position my career where I am today, given the state of AI? What should they be doing? What opportunities do you think they have within companies for growth and also independently?
So I'm actually a little, how should I say, not frustrated, but whatever comes before frustration, that moment when you start to sense that there's a little bit of slowness on the behalf of commercial organizations to get their teams up to speed. What I'm noticing and what I think is a little disappointing is that companies are letting or giving, I don't know if that's the right word, but they're just assuming that the responsibility of getting AI literate is the responsibility of the employee. There are no formal plans for many of these companies to educate and train their organizations in AI. Now, there are some organizations that are obviously assembling AI teams, they're assembling AI capabilities, but the true mark of intelligence is the capability to create capability, right? This is like that kind of circular thing where, hey, I have the knowledge to understand what knowledge is and go and pursue that. And I think it's both the responsibility of these organizations to create a safe place for that to happen, but then also resource that. They've got to create the time and money and energy to bring the necessary people together, bring in trainers, bring in whoever it is, bring in the right kind of projects, whether those projects are maybe some kind of hackathon or whatever, it doesn't really matter. But any kind of environment in which you can facilitate that AI literacy is going to be really important. And I know that's kind of self-serving because that's what we do, but it's a little disappointing to see that so few companies have formal plans to do that. They're really just saying, oh, by the way, you can use your training budget to go and educate yourself, go and seek out what you need to do. And I think part of it is just an indication that corporations don't know. They really don't know what AI is. They don't know what that means for them. They don't know what it means for those particular jobs. And that's not to say that they aren't, allowing their teams to use AI features within the SaaS products that they've currently got. So if Google says, hey, now you've got all these AI features in Workplace, great. If Apple says, hey, now you're going to have this on your various platforms, that's great. But really what that is a kind of a passive association with this trend as opposed to an active participation, which is, well, what should we be doing? How should we be getting ahead of this?
It's fascinating because last year we spoke about the need to not to be too opinionated about a tool, but to instead ensure that when we were talking to companies, when we were talking to individuals, we were giving them a framework for them to think through the changes that would be coming. And when you look at what has happened over the last year, I think there were a lot of companies, a lot of people that were just very reactive to what was happening in the AI space. So a new technology was rolled out, a new model was released, and immediately they thought they needed to jump on it and they needed to leverage that, right? And I think there is this need to have long-term thinking and definitely a more strategic approach, whether it's to your career or to your business and how you're going to be thinking about AI. Because as you can see, it's moving so quickly, right? Within days of technology coming out, now you have another one that has surpassed it. And I think you're seeing a couple of things. One, there is this stagnation that's happening for employees and creators because they're not sure what the next move is going to be because they're waiting on that next big thing to come. And then for companies, some of them are frustrated because they invested a lot initially in a certain platform, and within months it was replaced by that native functionality within maybe an OpenAI app or with Anthropic's Claude. And so I think for companies, especially as they think through what the next 12 to 36 months should look like, it has to be, okay, let's think long term. Let's think what this means for our business overall versus, let's just hop on this bandwagon, or how can we just take advantage of the technology as it is today?
It's a confusing time. It's a confusing time in the light of security risks, legal risks, understanding who to hire, who to keep on the team, who to retrain. I don't envy. I mean, my frustration or my concern or my disappointment isn't pointed at any one individual, one company, because I get it. I get just how confusing and how frustrating it must be. If I was running a company with 100,000 employees, I would be scratching my head as well. There are very, very difficult things. But here's where companies that have very grounded principles, first principles, or values in action can start to think about this through that lens. And that makes it a lot more, I wouldn't say easier, but it makes it a lot more effective to get the right decisions into the team and make the right choices about who's going to work there. Because when you have principles, you can say, hey, this is what we do. So, for example, one of the companies that I've been working with, they have a very clear set of principles. They know exactly what they want to do. They know exactly how they were going to do that. And they know that using those principles, they can make choices like, by the way, we're not going to buy new software. That's actually one of the choices that they made early on. It's because their customer base doesn't want the concern of having to manage more software, right? That is one thing that they were like, listen, we've already got that installed base. We've already got our software running with a bunch of customers. What we don't want to do is give them a whole bunch of new things to worry about, new logins, new SSOs, new risk, new legal conversations. What we want to do is embed everything that we've got in, or that AI promises, into what we've got. And I think that's one approach. I'm not saying that's the only approach. There is, like I said, there's no best practice. But I think that's a very principled approach. If you've got principles, go back to your principles, look at your vision, look at your mission, understand what you were trying to achieve, what the customer outcome looks like, and work backwards from there. And that's very often they give you a lot more value than saying, oh, we've got to bolt on this new fancy thing. And I think, sure, there are companies that are going to take advantage of AI as a way to boost their, company value, their share price, kind of get a marketing play out there. I get that. It's hard to avoid that kind of AI washing that happens. But I think the reality is that when this all kind of blows over and the bubble kind of either, deflates or pops or whatever happens to it, I'm not a market expert, so I'm not going to even speculate on what happens next. But I think there will be a slowing down. And once these companies start to slow down, the reality is going to kick in and they're going to have to go back to their basics again, back to the fundamentals.
All right. Well, what an intro for this week's news. Thank you for that. Thank you for that context. Amazing things happened this week. We can't help but discuss what is happening with Nvidia. All right. Nvidia is now the most valuable company by market cap in the world. I think it's An amazing story. It's an amazing journey. We have spoken about what we think are the risks with where Nvidia is trading at right now, how it's being valued. But give me your initial reactions. Just kind of coming off last week with the pop that we saw with Apple taking over from Microsoft briefly, and then Nvidia just kind of blowing everybody out the water. What did you think when you saw that?
I'm very conflicted. I'm conflicted because Nvidia is in my portfolio and I love to see it going up. And obviously that's, it's good for my future if it continues to maintain its value. But at the same time, it's all part of this kind of not just tech, but a general inflationary thing that's happened. And I just don't, I took my family out for dinner last night and it was an expensive meal. A pizza's $26. It's crazy. It's a lot of money for some fried dough or some baked dough, should I say? I think that's the conflict for me personally. Is that yes, while I see the market making clear that these companies are super valuable and that they're associating the price with that at the same time prices are going up in a lot of areas, not all areas, but in a lot of areas. And I think that that for the consumer must be a very, very a bit of a mindfuck because you're like, oh, hang on a second, I want my portfolio to increase in value, but at the same time, I really don't need healthcare to go up again and car prices to go up again and all those things. So I think that's just a general kind of the macro view of what's happening. From the particular Nvidia point of view, I do think that it's overvalued, but I don't think it's as overvalued as all the other players in this market. Nvidia is actually making the picks and shovels that we need to go and use to go and mine gold. And for sure, these guys...
They essentially have a monopoly on that right now.
Yeah. And I was reading the article that you published about this for those of you who want to go and dive deep into this history that Chris has put together of Nvidia. It's fantastic. It's on the website on Maginative.com. The story is intriguing because they've had the opportunity to do even more. There was a chance for them to actually become the sole chip provider for a while when they were going to acquire ARM. Kind of glad that didn't happen because of antitrust rules, but they've somehow managed to achieve that goal anyway. and they've managed to become this kind of monopoly. So I think from that point of view, we all need those picks and shovels if we're going to play in the AI space. We are going to need their chips. We're going to need their compute. We're going to need all of the services that they're also bundling in with these things, which can't be, even though they might be a small percentage of that overall revenue or the overall valuation, I think the services are critical because what we're seeing I was speaking to a Fortune 6 company on Tuesday, and they're saying, look, the real problem here, the concern that they have isn't that this stuff's not going to happen. Of course it's going to happen. The confusing thing is, how do we make it happen? How do we make it happen here? Like, we need consultants to come in and help us. They initially had one of the big 5 consulting companies come in and help them out. And then eventually they were like, well, that's not going to help because these guys know as little as we do.
Exactly.
But I think that what's necessary and what I'm seeing with a lot of the companies that I'm working with is that services are actually an incredibly important line item when it comes to selling software. Or any kind of solution that you're selling, whether it's a platform or a SaaS, you have to go in there with services package. You have to go in there and say, this is how you're going to onboard your team. This is how you're going to get trained. This is how you're going to use it. We're going to actually work with you through the bugs because God knows we haven't got all the answers either. And you're going to have to kind of walk this path with us. As I said, you're going to have to co-author this future. So I think that's really interesting is that these companies like Nvidia have a services arm. And I believe that even though it's not a significant chunk of their revenue, it could even be a loss leader for them. It's fine. Like, hey, give these services away because if people are adopting these technologies, if they're understanding how to use these technologies, it's going to drive NVIDIA to the forefront of that, the usage pattern, if we will. And then I think that this is also meaningful. NVIDIA's valuation is meaningful because what we're starting to see is a kind of another boom for tech where it's exciting for tech again to be able to say, well, what is it that we're going to create? I really liked the analogy that Sam Harris made about AI, which is this thing is we're creating something we don't even understand. And the analogy or the metaphor that he used was, imagine dogs invented humans to take care of them. Like, that's actually worked out really well for dogs. But dogs are, for the most part, 90% or more dogs are in really good situations where we spend billions of dollars on their food, on their health care. We give them a very safe place to live without predators, without disease, without concerns. The problem that dogs, of course, if they had invented human beings, would then encounter is that they have no ideas what problems human beings are creating for themselves. Mm-hmm. And human beings are clearly creating problems for themselves. And I think the same is true of that connection between AI and humans. We're creating something that will be a productivity benefit for us. It'll be an efficiency benefit for us. It'll take away the mundaneness of our work. And yet we also don't know what AI is going to create in terms of its own problems, because we don't have the intelligence to be able to see that problem. Right? We do, just too far apart. And so I think for companies like Nvidia especially, and the companies that are all kind of rushing to this boom, is that the bigger questions will still not be answered for a very, very long time. And maybe that's a good way to also mention the fact that one of the OpenAI co-founders, Ilya Sutskever, I think that's how you pronounce his name, has launched a new company that's focused entirely on this idea of like, well, what is this thing? What is safety? What is risk? What are the implications of this? And that's super interesting, is that some people are starting to apply their minds to this bigger issue.
So it's funny because kind of just leaning into Ilya's new company is called Safe Superintelligence Incorporated. And I was doing some research on it. It got incorporated in Delaware earlier this month. And it's conflicting because on one hand, you look at the state of AI today and you're thinking we're nowhere close to even basic intelligence with some of these models.
No, we got some good word editors.
Exactly right. And this is not to diminish the potential for them. I lighten AI today like my 4-year-old and my 6-year-old, and I say they will grow up to be brilliant humans. But today they're pretty dumb. They don't know much about the world. They don't understand the context of things that they're experiencing. And I think of AI like that. We kind of are at this stage where they're kind of toddlers. They're starting to make sense. They can imitate certain things. They can sound intelligent sometimes when they say certain things, and then he just falls off a cliff, right? And so he's starting this company called Safe Superintelligence. And the first question that I ask is, well, why, when he says that superintelligence is within reach, where is that perspective from? And you have to think it has to be a very informed perspective, because he was the chief scientist at the leading AI research lab. And so you think, well, are we about to see this really massive breakthrough in terms of capabilities with these models? And if so, are we prepared for that? And then what does safety mean? When you say safe superintelligence, I often think that safety is synonymous with control. And if you can control a superintelligence, or regulation, yes. But if you can control a superintelligence, is that a paradox? Is it superintelligent if you're able to control it, or are you the superior intelligence?
Let's talk about that for a minute. So the reason why Sam Harris uses the dog analogy to kind of explain the differences between the thing that we are creating and the thing that it could become is actually not a new idea. Michael Pollan wrote a book called The Botany of Desire many, many years ago. And he actually pointed out that from an evolutionary perspective, this happens pretty often, right? So the example that he used was that we now take for granted that grasses are everywhere. In fact, we eat grasses in the form of wheat and other things. And we essentially go out and clear trees and plant grasses. Now, whose idea is that? Is that our idea, or is that the grasses?
Or the grasses.
And through the lens that Michael Pollan puts on this thing is, well, if you make yourself so valuable, if you make your the quality of what it is that you're giving to the thing that you are having this relationship with, this kind of synonymous relationship with, or this symbiotic relationship with, then the grasses have made themselves incredibly valuable. Right? They've said, listen, we are so tasty and so valuable to your health that we're going to encourage you to cut down our biggest enemy, which is the tree, because they throw shade on us quite literally. And we're going to have you plant grasses. And I think this is it really. And we're not talking about lawns. We're not talking about garden lawns. We're talking about grasses that are grown for consumption. This is not a new idea. This idea has been around for a while. As an evolutionary biologist, we've actually seen how certain species can manipulate other species. I think from a regulatory point of view, we're starting to see the ways that we can actually regulate this that are similar to the analogs that we have out there. So, for example, this week, the Surgeon General announced that warning labels will need to be placed on social media.
Yep. Warning labels are the kind of things that you see on cigarettes, alcohol. This thing is untested in these areas. It causes these problems. And so social media is going to have to label it. Now, that's different from, say, age gating, which is another regulatory control. For instance, as your girl's growing up, they're going to want to have access to certain things. And you're going to say, well, you can't drink until this age. You can't drive until this age. You can't vote until this age. There's a lot of age gating. It's a slightly different regulatory model. But again, regulation exists, and we all live with it every single day. It's actually not making our lives worse. It's making our lives better for the most part, in spite of what some politicians would say. So I think regulation, I think people like Ilya are super important for informing what that regulation looks like. So they're going to go out, they're going to do some research, and they're going to come back and say, this is what is happening. You should consider the following measures, whether that's the Surgeon General or the FDA or the FCC or whatever. And I think that's normal. I think that's what we should expect from organizations like us to provide us the insight. What we didn't do with social media is actually get any insight into what the hell was going on until it was too late, until teenage girls were committing suicide because of what they were seeing on Facebook. So I think we do need these kinds of researchers, these kinds of safety controls, these kinds of regulatory controls. I am a big fan of seeing those things, especially as a parent, because they make sense. Here's the issue, Richard. I call bullshit on that, because can the dog provide regulations for the humans? That is the problem that I see in this startup.
No, I don't see that necessarily happening. But we also have seen a symbiotic relationship, right? We've got a relationship where the dog benefits. Maybe there are a couple of exceptions, but the dog benefits and the humans benefit, and that's what we're looking for. Okay, what we're looking for is a balance in nature. What you have to be very careful of is the narrative that kind of Silicon Valley and a lot of kind of capitalistic pundits would like us to believe, and that it's a winner takes all situation. And generally, there are situations where winner takes most, but actually there is a balance. And in most harmonious systems, there is always going to be a balance between the variations of what's going on. Like, hey, I provide this, you provide that. Yes, you are more powerful than me, but we are actually going to have a symbiotic relationship. Like, otherwise we would be at war every single day. We would go and invade China. We go and invade There are kind of these weird standoffs, these Mexican standoffs where you're like, yeah, I get it that you're powerful, and I get that we're also powerful, but mutual destruction is actually not the way to go here. So I think you're right in the sense that I'm not sure that the dog and the human being will ever really understand each other, but at the same time, I don't think they need to.
So there's this massive gap between where we are today and superintelligence that I think safety and regulation will be critical. And so this isn't to diminish the work that we need to put into that area and the importance of bringing conversations around access and bias to the fore. My concern is that we end up jumping to this hypothetical reality that it's almost science fiction at this point in time, where we're building for this world that seems out of our control. And so I think I can almost understand the conflict that existed between OpenAI's vision and where they were kind of saying, hey, we're going to build some products, we're going to put this in the hand of consumers, and Ilya's concern where it's like, hey, let's forget all of this and let's focus on this dream that's out there. And so I'm curious. I think it's great that if there was someone that I would want to be working on safety in AI, it would be Ilya, because I think he's super talented. I think he
and
is
he's had an
genuine.
insider's view as to just how. Yeah,
Exactly. I just think we need to be cautious about expending too many resources in that and avoiding the things that are right in front of us today around AI and its impact here.
I think related to Ilya's departure from OpenAI and this new thing that he's doing is the fact that, OpenAI is, very concerning place to be. They now have announced that they want to be a for-profit, which is no surprise to anybody, or shouldn't be a surprise to everybody. But the problem is that we're all kind of duped into believing that they were doing something else. And I think that's frustrating. I think if I'm looking at this, I'm thinking, wow, Sam, you're really not making me feel like I want to trust you. You keep on moving the goalposts, you keep on changing the story. I just don't trust him, and I want more Ilyas out there asking hard questions and less Sams out there doing what they're doing. So I've always been a big fan of what is happening in AI. I'm just not a big fan of the individuals, and I think that's a really good kind of a healthy approach, is to question the individuals, question what's happening. Most problems are a who problem, not a what problem. And then we can zoom out as well.
From the other perspective, as I see it, companies like OpenAI and Anthropic, they eventually need to go the product route for a couple of reasons. One, because the economics of AI development today means that you can't just say, hey, I'm going to ask you to invest billions, if not trillions of dollars to develop this technology without some sort of revenue stream. That's the first thing. So I think you'll need to have the SAMs of the world that say, hey, let's figure out a way to monetize this to make money so that we can build more of it. The second thing is, I think philosophically, there's this approach that says, before OpenAI decided to release ChatGPT, AI was being developed in these secret labs at Google, at Microsoft, etc. OpenAI was the first company that said, hey, you know what? We should invite people to build this with us. We should bring them along the journey. And the concerning argument from Ilya's manifesto was that we shouldn't expect any product from them soon. They're going to kind of go out and they're going to start developing this technology. And we shouldn't expect them to have any pressures to deliver a consumer product in the short term. They have this far out vision. And so is it better to say, hey, let's build this in public, let's make mistakes along the way and keep shifting the goalposts in terms of us evolving as opportunities arise? Or should it be, you know what, we're going to build this AI technology, and when we think it's safe, when we think it's ready, we're going to release it to the public?
First of all, OpenAI should have always been a nonprofit and stayed nonprofit. Not to diminish the fact that they brought AI into the open. I think that was a very reasonable thing for them to do as a nonprofit. But let's be real. They've never really been a nonprofit. This kind of thing that they call themselves like a profit-capped business, that's a thing that they made up. It's bullshit. It's PR. It doesn't even exist. There's no legal structure for that. Total bullshit. Okay. And that's what concerns me. So let's talk about that specifically, is that don't lie to the public. Don't lie about what it is you're doing and then pretend that you're going to do something else. I think that's the concern. The concern is lying. The second thing is, which is completely separate, which is, yeah, I like a long-term view. I want people to take a long-term view. I want them to plant seeds of which they will never sit in the shade of the trees that grow from those seeds, because that is more sustainable. If we're dealing with a mentality that says, oh, we should just be making products so we can make profits, so we can have a good quarter, then we're going to make shit choices. We're going to make choices that are based on what you and I want today versus what our children want. And as parents, I don't want that. I want people in the universe who say, let's think 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years from now and see what that looks like. And maybe those companies don't need a product. Maybe they don't need to have that kind of pressure on them to make a quarterly result. They just need the responsibility to go and represent us and go and find out what is going to happen.
Well, my argument is that's the role of government. That's not the role of a company. Like, you have the DARPAs of the world to be saying, hey, if we are thinking of safety from an AI perspective, we should get the Ilyas of the world to do this. But if you're
I'm not saying Ilya is the only person in the world who should be doing this. I'm just saying I like to see that long-term thinkers are thinking about safety because I have children and I care about them. But those two things are completely separate. I don't agree with what OpenAI is doing from a structural point of view. I think it's just a white-faced lie, and it just makes me want to trust Sam Altman even less than I currently do.
But even the communication, Richard, and I'm going to push on this because the communication that you saw where OpenAI was when Elon was there, they needed money, they needed funding. They went to a bunch of different companies. Microsoft was the one that decided to say, hey, we're going to fund you. And you make a deal with the devil in quotation. They're a for-profit company. They need to deliver returns. And
this is not one individual. Trust me, this is a group of individuals. A bunch of white guys pretty much sitting on the board. And now they've included the NSA on that board or an ex-NSA member on the board. I mean, it's like out of a movie. We're going to watch this in a documentary one day and go like, what the hell? What's happening?
I think the position that they have been put in terms of needing the resources, the capital resources, and them saying, hey, we're going to figure out a way to monetize this. I think it was smart. I think it was a necessary evil, if you will. And I think you're starting like anthropic.
Evil is the key word there. I think it's necessary evil for their point of view. I don't think it's a necessary evil for us.
Anthropic has been heralded as the gold standard when it comes to AI safety. And what did they do over the last couple of months? They brought on Mike Krieger last month as the chief product officer. They released 3.5 yesterday, which we'll talk about. But you're starting to hear them say that they have this vision of Claude being this amazing collaborative workspace. And you can see that they realize that they need to move into offering a product because this costs money. There are real costs associated with building this technology. And how do you do that without some sort of funding? Like, who funds this if not you developing a product?
I don't know if you've checked the market recently, but these companies are making billions of dollars every quarter in profits. So I'm not really concerned with their funding sources. I'm not really concerned with where they're going to get money from. I think there's a massive amount of money, a lot of almost free money out there for these companies, and they've got to invest that somewhere. And so, yes, this is what they're investing. So I don't think that's a concern that we should have. They'll find the money, they'll turn it into a product eventually. That's not my concern. I imagine that'll happen. But my concern is, it's just kind of, I want to keep, I have this kind of, I'm generally an optimistic person, and I just like to believe that there are people out there who give a shit about the future. And Sam just doesn't strike me as one of those people.
All right. So we have Sam. What about Elon and X? Do you think it's Elon that's going to is going to be the one to deliver with X AI?
I don't know. I really don't know enough about what's happening in X. They've been pretty private about what they're doing. The problem with having Elon as a spokesperson is that you just can't trust what's coming out of his mouth. It's very, very difficult to discern between what's reality and what's just kind of, that week's, psychedelic inspired idea. I don't want to undermine the fact that, these are brilliant minds who are obviously incredibly good at creating new technologies, but I'm just not sure that I trust them. And I think that's the distinction I'm making here.
He said something the other day that I thought was telling. Somebody criticized him for his vision of the future that we'd have self-driving cars and all these things by now. And he said, sure, I'm optimistic, but it's because I'm optimistic why we've been able to accomplish a lot of the things that we have and so quickly, because he's willing to push team to deliver and to think beyond where they are. Anyways, super interesting conversation. We could talk a lot about it, but the big two models and technologies that dropped this week that we have to touch on before we wrap up. One, Runway released their new video model, their new video engine, if we want to call it that, Gen 3 Alpha, and it is incredible. Like when you look at the quality of the videos that you're getting out of this model, it's amazing. I'll share a clip with the viewers that they can just see this if they haven't. But check out the article on the website. There will be lots more examples there. But you're starting to see,
beautiful
especially
stuff
for Content creators, yeah. For content creators, the tools are getting better. The control that you want is getting better. This model understands light, and it understands a lot of the nuanced language that a creative director would probably be using to create a scene. I think you're going to see this revolution happen over the next 3 to 6 months with the video.
Yeah, we saw it with Apple as well, right? We saw how
Yep.
you can now have multiple iPhones, recording devices, and you can manage that all from another device, like an iPad. This is what I really get excited about when I see AI finding its way into the productivity, is that idea that an individual now becomes 10 individuals. That's what's interesting about AI, not the share price of a big company. What's interesting is that an individual creator, somebody like you and me, who is a producer or a content creator or a designer or an engineer, can now say, gee, I don't need to go out and like assemble a team of 5 people. I can see my vision come to light using these products. That's exciting. That's like what we should really, really be thinking about. That's what the voice of AI should be, is that we are going to give so many people the opportunity to be so creative in such a quick and easy way, and an affordable way. Hey, I don't need a big studio. Like our mutual friend Trip Clements, who we interviewed on the show earlier this year, sold his movie company, or his documentary movie company, to a big agency, and now he's thinking about what he can do with AI. Right, like he's thinking like, I don't need all of these people. I can actually go and do something with AI, and I think that's really interesting. Is that how does that creative individual go and use these tools to make something wonderful?
It's incredible. In the last month, we have seen Kuaishou's Kling. We've seen Dream Machine from Luma AI Labs. Google unveiled Veo a couple months ago. Of course, in February, OpenAI announced Sora. And now Runway. And the amazing thing is that creators will have choice. They'll have all of these different models and platforms that they can use. And it's exciting. Last night, I was having a conversation with a designer, and he's building this really interesting clothing brand. And I said, it would be really interesting if you could just bring these characters that you're creating to life for fans and consumers to interact with. And he asked me, like, well, what am I talking? And I showed him some examples, and he lost it. Like he's thinking of how this can really help to take his platform to another level when you have the voice from an 11 Labs and the ability to translate it into different languages. And so it's an exciting time. It's a truly exciting time as a creator. If you haven't checked out these tools and you're on the fence, I would say just give them a try. Yeah. Make a video with AI.
Even if you're in a business and you recently talking to a company with a big sales team, a global audience, in other words, lots of people who speak lots of different languages who are using their product. Show them HeyGen, show them what they can do, the ability to create, as we did, Korean, French, Spanish-speaking versions of ourselves, avatars of ourselves, and the sales team was just blown away. They were like, wait, we can clone ourselves into other language-speaking versions of ourselves. That's a massive unlock. And, I might be a little naive here, but it actually brings the fun back to doing work, right? The worst part of work is that it becomes mundane. Yeah. The worst part of work is that it becomes so routine that it lacks any reason for you to learn and challenge yourself. Yeah. And yet, what is the one thing that makes us human beings? That the fact that we can be inventive, that we can be using our imagination and be creative. And so when we see these tools, we suddenly start being children again. We're like, oh, wow, I can play, I can have fun, I can enjoy myself. And it brings back a whole bunch of those there are feelings, but a lot of that like energy back into work. And I think that's what I'm starting to see is, hey, did you know about this? Have you seen this? Try that. And then people coming back and saying, I actually had fun today. Like I enjoyed my work today. Take the mundane out of it.
And so I think to just call that out, you do have these creative tools like the ones I mentioned. But to your point, Richard, you have video tools that are more geared towards educational use cases, sales like HeyGen. And they actually really raised $60 million this week.
Yeah.
That's an amazing statistic. Again, the money that's in the market today, these companies aren't really having an issue. They're profitable.
Yeah.
They have been profitable
Yeah.
for months now.
Great tools.
Exactly.
Great. I mean, these are real productivity tools. This is not, there are some things out there that haven't shown what they're actually going to release yet, so we don't really know. But wow, I mean, HeyGen's useful. We've used it ourselves.
Exactly. We'll endorse it any day.
Yeah, and there's lots of productivity tools, and I think that's what we started the conversation there today with. What is AI? What does it mean for everybody? How is it actually useful? Get in there, start using these products. Go to the Maginative website, see what it is that we're writing about. Find out how you can start using those products. Just play, have fun.
Yeah.
Put no pressure on yourself. Bring it to your team. Ask the team to fiddle around with it. What could we do with this? How could we make this, part of what we do and take some of the mundaneness and inefficiencies and friction out of the work that we do and put in some of the fun and playfulness so that we can actually feel interested in the work again.
Love that. All right, last story for the day. Claude 3.5 Sonnet has been released. And so some context. Anthropic released Claude 3 a few months ago. They released 3 different models. You had Haiku, the smaller, faster version. You had Sonnet, great for conversation, a nice middle ground. And then you had Opus, which was their big mama, right? Like the best of the best. They actually released Claude 3.5 Sonnet, which is their middle model, which is now much more powerful than even Opus. It's even outperforms GPT-4o. So this is right now the state-of-the-art language model in the world, bar none. We have seen their benchmark, but you have had independent testers now confirm that it will beat GPT-4o on basically all of the models across vision, across understanding, coding. It's a great model. I've been using it for a while now, and it is amazing to just see the evolution of it. They also announced a new feature called Artifacts, which is kind of like code interpreter if you're coming from the ChatGPT world, that allows you to kind of visualize and output as you're creating your prompts. But this is exciting. It's exciting because for the first time in a year, a little over a year, we're seeing a company overtake OpenAI in terms of just that state of the art. The context, of course, is one, Anthropic will be doing the same for Opus. So you'll have Opus 3.5, which will be a much bigger model, much more capable model. And of course, OpenAI is going to be working on ChatGPT 5 or GPT-5, I should say. So what are your thoughts? How are you thinking about even more capable models coming out today?
Yeah, it's more of the same. Like I said, I'm excited to see that these models are becoming better and faster and more efficient. I am also very eager to see, as you have said in the past, that we also need small models. It's not just like they're on the app side.
Yeah.
I was talking to somebody this week about a project that they were doing, and they said, yeah, what they were able to do is actually take one of the models and kind of break it down into something that was very useful for their particular usage needs.
Yeah.
I think you and I both know Jordy Cadies. He is currently heading design over at Heroku, very much involved in that kind of Salesforce universe. And he is building a product for his wife's business, and he needed an LLM to help him get there. And the problem, of course, is that most of these things just struggle on mobile and they struggle on native. And so actually making them smaller is something I'd like to see. Scale is very fashionable. Growth is very fashionable. Size is very fashionable. But actually what I think a lot of creators are looking for is something that says, hey, yeah, this works on my phone without using 50% of the battery power in the next hour. So I think, I'm excited, but at the same time, I'm also kind of thinking, when's the real practical stuff going to hit me so that I can start building stuff?
All right. So top of mind for me, kind of just wrapping up for this week. You're right. Scale, I think, is important, but efficiency and size will be really
energy
important.
Usage. Oh my God.
Battery
usage.
The bottleneck, the conversations that I'm seeing increasingly over the last 3 months is just this concern about energy. And you're starting to see this push for more nuclear because the energy requirements that we're going to need are unbelievable. And so I think even just thinking, how does this impact the rest of the world? That's a big question to ask. One really great tip, if you're a listener, you haven't been using the Maginative website a lot, tags on the Maginative website are a superpower. So if you're interested in, let's say, a certain company, just click on that tag and it will filter all the stories for that company. Or if you're interested in a certain industry, so let's say you're interested in AI and audio, find that audio tag or search for it and get all the latest in terms of the models and the technologies and the tools. We're trying to make the website super helpful. So if you have recommendations, if you have needs in terms of and suggestions in terms of how we can make the website better, definitely reach out to us. But as always, there are tons of stories that we don't get to cover in our conversations on a weekly basis. So head on over to the website and check them out. We'd love your support. If you can, certainly subscribe. We have a paid tier. It's just $10 per month or $100 per year. We would love all the support that we can get. Thank you for tuning in. Richard, any closing words?
Yeah, if you're going to Config in San Francisco next year, come and find me. I am very fortunate that I'll have a VIP badge, so I'll be able to access just about any of the leadership spaces and forums. So if you're one of those leaders, you want to chat about AI, you want to talk about AI literacy, you want to talk about generative AI, I'll be there. And in fact, an entire day of the config agenda is dedicated to AI, which is incredible. First day, almost entirely dedicated to AI. Second day, entirely dedicated to design systems. So, hey, I happen to know about those things. Come and talk to me.
What a time to be alive. Well, next week is going to be exciting. Definitely tune into Config if you're not going to be there in person. They'll have an amazing keynote. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Until next time, one love.